Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V, and today I wanted to talk about the current state of multi-crew gameplay in Star Citizen. The footage you're currently seeing on screen is of members of the Forgotten Heralds conducting CIC training, where a commander aboard a large multi-crew vessel is giving orders and instructions to both the crew of the ship and its escorts. Now, we've been doing this training on and off for the past few months now, and the reason for this is we want our aspiring officers to get a feel for commanding vessels and escorts both in PvE and PvP scenarios. And this is in preparation for the eventual introduction of Pyro. You see, CIG have been teasing Pyro, server meshing, and work on much larger vessels such as the Bandu Merchantman. And while it's not been directly communicated by CIG that the introduction of Pyro will also include capital class vessels such as the Idris or Javelin for players to control, it is clear that they do want players to utilize decent-sized multi-crew vessels for Pyro, due in part to Pyro's lack of infrastructure, requiring exploration groups to rely on other vessels for transportation, protection, and resources such as fuel and logistics, and much more. This means that learning to herd cats while in command of a large fleet is going to be key going forward for many organizations that want to explore Pyro for fun and profit. While conducting these training operations, I've had some stick time with Star Citizen's current stable of multi-crew vessels, which has given me some time to think about what is missing from the current state of multi-crew gameplay. Now, undoubtedly, a lot of you have enjoyed multi-crew gameplay yourself, as evidenced by many of you who have enjoyed our Constellation Gunship videos. With that being said, what is the current state of multi-crew gameplay, and what can CIG do now to improve it in the short term? In the current state of multi-crew, we still have the old MFDs we've had since 3.0, and they've served us admirably all these years, but as combat and gameplay deepens further patch over patch, it becomes painfully obvious that these MFD systems have largely outstayed their welcome. For one, these systems can only display one page at a time, so in the case of the Constellation, the co-pilot can alter capacitor systems and even man missiles, but they can only view one MFD page at a time, made even worse by the fact that they have only one MFD screen. So they have to constantly fiddle with the screen to get new data as it comes in, and if they want to relay the current shield status, they then have to switch to the shield's page, but if they forgot which systems they've applied power to or which ones they haven't, then they have to fiddle with the screen just to see the power page and give that information out. And even worse, since they don't have access to the full missile interface, they may have to switch to the weapons page just to see how many missiles they have, and the headaches go on and on from there. Now, of course, for a while now, CIG have teased us with the updated MFD pages that are supposed to be much more flexible in their information delivery and overall aesthetic design and utility. But as of yet, it's largely been radio silence regarding these new MFDs. It may be that they are indeed working on them, but they just don't want to show the work currently, possibly because it's just not in a presentable state just yet. Regardless, it is one of the major issues with multi-crew currently. Addressing the MFDs could also potentially help address other issues like how inconsistent systems are being handed off to other stations. For example, on the Raft, the co-pilot has access to both turret weapons and also the countermeasure systems. However, the game does not tell the players this, and if a missile comes bearing down on the ship, the pilot will see the warnings and then hit their countermeasure button only to realize that nothing is happening, and this is because the control for countermeasures was passed on to the co-pilot. And even worse, if the co-pilot is in the remote turret, they do not get audible or visual warnings that missiles are inbound, which means that the pilot would then need to call out incoming missiles to the co-pilot, which then the co-pilot would have to reach out and hit their countermeasures key, and it just makes things even more inefficient all around. It would just be better if there was an interface or some kind of audible warning or anything for that remote turret to let the co-pilot know that a missile is inbound on the ship. And that's just one example. There are many other cases where ship systems feel so arbitrary in what it hands off to other stations, assuming it even hands off those systems to other stations to begin with. Indeed, many of you have commented in my videos for the Constellation Gunship that you were surprised to see the co-pilot station working at all because in your own play sessions it did not work like ours did. And that is because of the way the systems are passed along to other stations, depends entirely on whether you got into those stations before or after the pilot took control of the ship. It is just a mess of musical chairs you have to play to get it to work right, and it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. Also, why is it that the co-pilot of the Constellation has access to missiles and power allocation, but they can't adjust shield facings? It just doesn't make sense, but I digress. Let's move on. Alright, beyond MFDs and functions being passed around between stations, there's also the distinct absence of engineering gameplay. Now, CIG have been teasing work in progress for this type of gameplay, and as exciting as it is to see the idea of a player working on a component of a ship and fixing it, there's still some small problems here. Even if they were to implement a system like that now, at this moment, it still would largely leave a lot to be desired. And the reason for that is without physicalized damage modeling, the idea of fixing components in the middle of a fight would largely be moot. Think about it, how common have you seen component damage on your own ship? When fighting with lasers, you don't see a lot of component damage. You mostly notice this damage from explosive weapons like missiles or C-788 cannons, but beyond that, not really much else. Eventually, the idea is that with proper physicalized damage, ballistics and lasers can poke holes into the armor, damaging component systems, and actually creating some more interesting dynamics going on with the ship as it becomes damaged. But without that right now, all we have instead is really just wear, which is something that could actually be adjusted to add more interest in the short term, sure. Pushing a large multi-crew ship to its limits could cause more degradation and require more maintenance and repair. But of course, we would then need to have spare parts for players to buy and store on the ship to fix systems when they start to break down. Now, this could be a short-term holdover until full physicalization of subsystems, and they could even increase the wear down faster during combat to make things far more interesting. But we'll have to wait and see, as currently there's not much visible movement on this front beyond some work-in-progress showcases that came out recently. This then leaves us down to gunnery. Currently, gunnery is by far the most fleshed out, having its own bespoke UI elements, auto-targeting systems, gyro stabilization, staggered firing modes, and even damage modeling as turrets can be knocked out of action in the middle of a fight. However, of course, there's still much more work that could be done. They still suffer from MFD issues, and even worse, remote turrets lack even more information as they do not even have target status data like you would get with manual turret MFDs. This means that you can see the enemy's name, but you cannot see their ship's status or even your own ship's status. You just get a targeting UI to aim the guns, and that's pretty much it. One of the nice features of manual turrets is they have access to their MFD, so they can somewhat visualize where the turret is and where it's currently aiming on the self-status page, whereas the remote turrets don't get this luxury at all due to the missing self-status feature. Also, the current pin target system is only usable by the pilot. If you're not already aware, pilots can pin targets they have selected, and the entire crew can see those pin targets marked on their heads-up display. This is extremely useful for designating target priorities to the crew, but because it's only designated to the pilot, this means that they have to spend time combing through targets to find the right ones to pin. This functionality would best be suited to a co-pilot role or a gunner slot on the ship where a player is occupying, so they can designate targets while the pilot just focuses on flying. Furthermore, pins currently are lost when the target is lost by the ship's passive radar, which means it can make it a bit more frustrating to use, since that means that that target has to then be repinned when it shows back up on radar again. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. Another way to make this system more interesting is by adding a ping system that crew can use to quickly point out something. This can be a quick 5-second long marker that can be used for navigation or pointing out targets and much more. The more tools crews can have to communicate with each other with, the overall better experience you can expect. There are also still numerous polish issues with the turret systems. The most common example is in that many manual turret positions, such as the one in the Redeemer and the Reclaimer, are still exposed to the exterior, which means that gunners can be affected by elements such as extreme temperatures and lack of oxygen if they don't have a suit. Also, in regards to turrets getting knocked out during a fight, currently the game does not telegraph this at all to the player. Instead, it just takes control away from the player and displays a big aligning green text at the bottom while also shutting off the MFDs, and that's pretty much it. There definitely needs to be improvement to the HUD to let the player know that their turret is out of action, otherwise it just looks like a bug. Now, not huge priorities I've laid out here, sure, I know, but still, they are general polish issues CIG can quickly address in the short term. And finally, in regards to turrets, it would be really nice if gunners have the option to turn off the aim assists. There are moments, for example, where I would be turret gunning on a ship in atmosphere and the auto aim would simply not account for gravity pulling the projectiles down, so targets a decent clip away, even if stationary, would have entire magazines miss because the auto targeting simply just does not account for projectile drop. These kind of situations are where it would be nice to turn off the aim assist. It would also make manual targeting of subsystems like enemy turrets or engines a bit easier. Yes, we do have sub-targeting, I know, but it would be nice to have that flexibility rather than having to cycle sub-targets over and over, especially if you're in a remote turret where you can't even see what you are sub-targeting to begin with. There are, of course, many other features we could talk about that are missing, but again, my goal here is to talk about the current state of multicrew and what CIG could do in the short term to improve things going forward as progress is being made on the more complex systems. To recap, an improvement to the MFD system is sorely needed. Information is king, and when manning a multi-crew ship, the more information that is available and is able to be relayed to each member of the crew, the better. On top of better MFDs, co-pilots need some functional HUD elements rather than just the placeholder blank UIs. At most, tie their data to what the pilot sees so they can at least see data like fuel states, speed of the ship, altitude, something other than just the blank interface we have now that just has no data. It would also be handy for them to see a proper missile interface if their station is controlling those systems. Next, improve the way systems are handed off to other crews, either through the MFDs, making it clear who has access to what, or a simple message or even just an audible alert, something to let the crew know what has been passed on to them. On top of that, add more stations that can take up other roles. For example, the Constellation co-pilot seat can operate missiles and power allocation, but the Retaliator's engineering station can't do anything at all other than just stare at the torpedo racks. Make more of these auxiliary stations usable for more multi-crew ships to make things more interesting for the crew if they decide to take up those slots. Improve remote turret stations so they have a bit more information parity with manual turrets, helping remote operators see the status of the ship and enemy targets rather than feeling lost half the time during the fight. A rudimentary ping system would also be useful here, where crew can ping quickly a marker on the HUD for all members so they can focus their attention in that area. This would be great for pointing out targets, landmarks, or for general use in navigation. Polish existing turret systems by ensuring they have proper atmosphere to protect the crew in the manual stations, and also relay information such as the turret being damaged so the player can clearly see that their turret is down rather than chalking it up to a bug. These are my own personal observations on the current state of multi-crew gameplay. I would say that multi-crew is largely functional in its current state, but more can always be done. I know there are more systems CIG have talked about that will make multi-crew much more interesting, like damage modeling, fire propagation, life support, repair and maintenance, and so much more. But those systems are complex and will take time to implement. Currently, the foundations are decent, but there are still many quality of life issues that could be addressed in the short term, and hopefully I've laid them out here well enough. Alright folks, that's it for me today. I hope this has given you some food for thought regarding the state of multi-crew gameplay. I highly recommend you get some friends together and try multi-crewing out yourself, and let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like as it really does help out the channel, and of course, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, subscribe. Until next time, fly safe and I'll see you all in the black.
Back on the block.